Welcome to the April edition of the Keep Indiana Learning and ESC of I Spring Speaker event. We are excited to continue this series with this third event today, Modernizing Tier 1 Instruction with Modern Classrooms Project. The two previous episodes you can find on the Keep Indiana Learning YouTube channel. And so today, let's go ahead and get started. Blended learning is becoming a driving force in the way in which educators engage students in the learning process. With blended learning, students are able to determine the pace, the path, the time, and place in which they partake in learning. Talk about voice and choice. I am all about that. Today, our speaker, Matt Hickson, will share with us a revolutionary instructional model which has provided teachers and students with a robust experience. Modern Classrooms Project is taking the educational world by storm with its teacher-created videos, self-paced learning, and mastery-based checks. So before we jump in, a little bit about Matt. Matt is a community organizer turned school leader. He believes in leveraging the power of education to build more joyful, purposeful, and just communities. And if you've watched the second in our Spring Speaker series, this is a perfect fit because Part 2 was all about joy and purpose. So this is a perfect tie. Matt was the Durham Public Schools Beginning Teacher of the Year before becoming a principal and Central Services Director of Blended Learning. He currently serves as the Vice Chair for the Board of Directors at Student U and the DPS Foundation. When not organizing and learning, Matt is an avid Buffalo Bills fan and a dog dad to his new puppy, Archie. He currently resides in Boston, Massachusetts. So Matt Hickson, the Director of Partner Transformation with Modern Classrooms Project, is ready to share with us about how this model can single-handedly strengthen your Tier 1 instruction. So Matt, we are so happy to have you today.
Marty, thanks so much for having us, and thanks to the state of Indiana that has really made investments in Modern Classrooms Project. Welcome on behalf of our team. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you all about one of our favorite topics, which is thinking about how to support all learners with a robust core instruction. So looking forward to getting started, and thanks so much for having us.
Oh, we are glad to have you. Go for it. Thank you, Matt.
Great. So I'll get started and just say that today our goal is to cover those elements that Marty talked about in the introduction: mastery-based, self-paced, and blended learning. Those are the three components of the Modern Classrooms Project that come together to create our instructional model. And we believe strongly that the model that we've created can create a more effective Tier 1 instructional environment for all students. And we'll talk to you in this presentation about how that happens. I'll start by recapping what the components of an effective Tier 1 are, and then we'll unpack the modern classroom piece by piece, showing you what mastery-based instruction, self-paced, and blended instruction are. And then we'll look at the implications for student learning and kind of bring it all together at the end. So Marty gave me a very generous introduction, and I appreciate that. I'll just say that I'm super excited to be here with you to talk about this specific topic, because in addition to some of the other things that were mentioned, I was on the advisory board for the Learner Variability Project for Digital Promise that helped launch their Learner Variability Project work. And so learner variability, learning differences, universal design is a big part of the passion that I have and the reason that I'm in this work. I really believe in supporting all students and building instructional environments that can respond to students' needs. And that's exactly what MTSS, what tiered instruction, and what an effective core is all about. It's building a structure that can respond to all students' needs. So the goals of Tier 1 instruction are to provide universal access to effective curriculum and instruction, to create structures for equitable support that prevent lingering skill gaps that students sometimes carry with them, grade level after grade level, and to monitor progress so that we can respond to students' needs through formative assessments and screeners. These are all things that you've no doubt seen and heard as part of district trainings, and often we don't really unpack how this works in the classroom. How do we build a system that functions? That's our goal today. Ultimately, we want to arrive at instruction that's proactive so that we can ensure student success instead of spending all of our time in tiers 2 and 3 creating interventions, when we could instead really invest in a Tier 1 instructional environment that supports students so they need less intervention later on. Proactive, differentiated, and universal teaching and learning is really the bottom line of effective Tier 1 instruction. So A lot of times you'll see graphics like this, and ultimately what we want you to know is that an effective Tier 1 instructional environment should support 80 to 90% of students in showing proficiency on a given standard. I want to put a big asterisk next to that I'll come back to in a second as I talk about our learning environments. And then this next part is critical, that students' individual progress toward proficiency in the Tier 1 environment informs the interventions that happen in Tier 2 and Tier 3. So we know that students are struggling based on those formative assessments, based on screeners, and we assign additional intervention, but ultimately their progress toward proficiency in the core instruction is what we're trying to get at. And so Tier 1 is so important. Without an effective Tier 1 that can reach 80% or 90% of students, we might as well not even design Tier 2 and 3 interventions because we're broken at the foundation. And so I want to go back for a second and just say, a lot of times when we hear this, right, as educators, and I'll share my own experience with this number of 80 to 90% of students showing proficiency in a given standard, we say, well, but what about in schools and environments where we have a huge number of English language learners or students that are multiple grade levels behind, and we're looking at middle school or high school now where they've been carrying skill gaps for a long time. Sometimes we have what we call the inverted triangle, where there's more like 80% of students that aren't currently proficient in a topic. How do you design instruction when that is the case? And I'll share that that is exactly why I came to the Modern Classrooms Project as an educator. Because as a teacher, when you're standing in a room, you know that there are many students that are on grade level and present, but there are often more that are absent some days and are having trouble catching up. There are some that are below proficiency in one subject area or skill or multiple subject area or skills, and they feel lost during instruction. And you're standing at the front of the room as an educator or as a school leader looking at your environment, thinking about how you might address all these students' needs and thinking, we're set up to fail. We don't have a core environment right now where 80 to 90% of students are proficient. And that's not your fault as an educator. It's not your fault as a school leader. The truth is that the structures for traditional classrooms are broken. The idea that we can stand up in front of the classroom and reach every student in front of us and all of their different levels with a lecture-based one-size-fits-all approach is a structural problem. And so in order to keep educators in the profession, feel empowered as learners and teachers, we need to develop a new approach that meets all students' needs. And the approach that we've created is called the Modern Classrooms Project. And so I'll share a little bit about what our work is, and then we'll dive into each component one at a time.
Here's the challenge of teaching. You work hard to plan great lessons, but when you get to class, you realize some of your learners already know this. They're bored. Some of your learners have gaps in what they understand. They're lost. Some of your learners aren't in class at all. They miss out. And somehow, you've got to reach them all. You might feel overwhelmed. Meeting every learner's needs might feel impossible. But it's not your fault. And it's not your learner's fault either. It's just that when it comes to learning, one size does not fit all. So what can you do? How can you teach in a way that meets every learner's needs? First, create short videos to explain your content. You're still the one teaching, but learners can watch your lessons anytime, anywhere. They can skip ahead or rewatch if they need. You can spend class time working one-on-one with learners or leading small groups. And learners who miss class can always catch up. Second, help learners pace themselves. Learners who are ready to go faster can move ahead as soon as they're ready. Learners who need more time have the time they need. Learners who miss a day can pick up right where they left off, and you're there to support and encourage each of them. Third, focus on mastery. When learners show they understand, they can move on. If they don't understand yet, help them, then give them another chance. This prevents learning gaps, and it shows learners that when a classroom really meets their needs, they can master anything. Teacher-created videos, self-pacing, and a focus on mastery. We call this a modern classroom. It's a model built by teachers for teachers. Research shows that in modern classrooms, learners feel more capable and engaged. while teachers feel happier and more effective. Modern classrooms are calmer, and everyone in them can thrive. Teaching this way takes practice, but there are free resources to help you get started and a global community of educators who can support you along the way. Remember, you're a teacher, you're up for the challenge, and you really can meet every student's needs. So what are you waiting for? Your journey to a modern classroom begins today.
So
Here-
I think you can see how the components that are in that video can help us create a stronger and more differentiated universal access to instruction for students. So let's break them down piece by piece. Like we said, blended, self-paced, and mastery-based learning are those components. They were described as video, self-pacing, and checking for mastery on the video. But let's dig into each one and talk about what it really means. And we like to start with mastery-based instruction because it's really the core of everything that we do. The idea that we're trying to ensure students move from lesson to lesson based on their mastery of skills and content, not just based on the fact that the day has moved from one calendar day to the next. We design classrooms where students can move based on mastery. So we have some assumptions about best practices in mastery-based learning. We know that it's an instructional approach that ensures that students need to exhibit mastery in order to move on. And we know that it's done best when learning is divided into small, very specific chunks that are aligned with skills and standards. That students are given opportunities to practice those small chunks before they move on, and that they're assessed frequently throughout so that we can give feedback and guide the learning as opposed to waiting for a summative assessment or waiting for later in the unit to be able to know that a student is behind. We want to catch those skill gaps early and be able to address them. What does the research say about mastery-based learning? Why is this approach really the cornerstone of our model? Well, first, like we said, the research shows that it prevents lingering skill gaps. The more we focus on mastery and help students understand where they are on their own journey toward mastering content, the more likely they are to close those gaps and ensure that critical skills are in their toolbox instead of being left behind. It improves student satisfaction. Mastery is one of the core drivers of motivation for human beings. A lot of psychologists have done research on this. Mastery is critical to human beings' happiness and understanding. That's why people love to play a video game or learn an instrument, because they're mastering a skill and leveling up on their abilities. Mastery-based classrooms have this same type of effect on students. They feel purposeful, and they feel that there's meaningful progress being made in their learning. And finally, they build student self-confidence. As students master more content, they feel more capable as a learner and more able to take on additional tasks and rigor. So how does mastery-based learning happen in a modern classroom? It happens with bite-sized mastery checks. At the end of each chunk of instruction, each skill or part of a standard that you're trying to address, students have a quick mastery check that says, am I there yet or no? And then teachers define those criteria and revise, reassess, and reflect with students on how they're working toward that progress if they don't get it right the first time. Ultimately, students only move on to the next lesson when they've mastered the previous skill. I want to talk about this picture on the right because I actually took it in one of our modern classrooms. This is a kindergarten classroom in Minnesota. And in this video, the teacher is going over with the student a mastery check that they had just completed a few seconds earlier. At the end, the student completed 3 out of the 6 shapes, right? This was a kindergarten shapes assessment. And when the student walked away, I pulled them aside and I asked, how'd you do on your mastery check? What happened? He looked at me and he said, well, I got 3 of them right, but that's not quite where I want to be yet. So I have to do some more studying and try it again tomorrow. This is a kindergartner. And that's the power of mastery learning. That's the power of helping students understand their journey toward mastery. So what are the best practices for mastery checks that help us build these systems for students to check themselves and get feedback from us? First, we want them to align to the lesson objective and end of unit assessment. We want them to be completed within 10 minutes. Again, these are short chunks. If you're having trouble making them short and completable within 10 minutes, it's probably because the chunk of learning that's aligned with them is a bit too long. This means that students can get fast feedback and that they can reassess often multiple times within a class period as they work toward mastery. And then finally, we're going to be criteria-based evidence for mastery. So there needs to be some sort of rubric or clear criteria that allows the student to know, did I master this or not? Mastery checks are the cornerstone of a modern classroom, and effective individualized mastery checks allow for the rest of the pieces, the self-paced and the blended learning, to work effectively. So once you have a mastery check in place for each of the chunks of the standard in your unit, then you can build a self-pacing plan for students, right? We want to know that students have a plan to get to each of those mastery checks one by one, master them, and know what they move on to next. That's the whole purpose of the self-pacing plan. You can start to see now how the mastery check serves as the key. It serves as the door or the exit ticket between each chunk of the lesson. So why self-paced learning, and what are the best practices in it? Well, first and most importantly, self-paced learning allows for each student to have different levels of speed with different content. We know that each learner is going to take different amounts of time. Some people will take longer on one part of a standard and then speed through another part because they have previous experience with that, or they're not missing a skill there that they need to practice as they work on. And so we want to build an environment where students can receive extra time and support with material they struggle with. They can monitor their progress and reflect on learning strategies, and they can revisit topics if they need, getting additional support from their teacher. So how do we do this in a modern classroom? A couple of pictures here on the right. I'll describe what they look like. So in a modern classroom, students are self-paced within a unit. It's very important that it doesn't say within the whole year, within a unit of study. So let's say 3 to 5 weeks, students have a self-pacing plan to achieve mastery of the content in that unit. Each lesson within the unit is classified. It has must do, the most important components to reach the standard and grade level, should do, additional activities that build rigor and depth, and aspire to do, extension activities that allow the student to connect with their interests, have voice and choice. And this classification not only allows for self-pacing to be longer and more robust and deep, it also allows for real differentiation where you as the educator can help guide students to select learning activities that align with their needs and skills and help them deepen their knowledge to the best of their ability. And then the critical part that brings all of this together, the lesson classifications, the mastery check at the end of each lesson, is that teachers track each student's progress using the results of those mastery checks to check where students are daily. So if you look on the upper picture, that's an example of a student-facing tracker that shows the student, I have my video and guided notes, I have my quick assignment, and then I have my mastery check for each lesson. On the bottom right is the teacher's tracker, showing each student in the class and whether they're currently on pace, behind pace, needing to revise, and what they're working on today. This allows for that differentiated support because teachers can pull small groups, guide interventions, and all the other pieces that we know are really important to achieve high quality teaching during the class period. And we'll come back to that in just a second. So the first part of that is lesson classification. You see it here in the student tracker on the right. This is a fancier one than the one I showed you on the first page, but it still has the same pieces. It has those must-do lessons, the should-do lessons, and the aspire-to-do lessons. And it suggests due dates for those lessons, so students have a scaffold there to boost their executive functioning skills and help them build those skills to meet deadlines that we know we all need in the real world. So once you set those lessons up, then you put them in the tracker. Like I said, those student-facing trackers help students build the skills to monitor their progress, to encourage ownership of their learning, to plan and stay organized, and most importantly, to reflect on how they're doing and what strategies they're using in order to achieve mastery. I showed you a fancier one in the previous slide. Here's a really simple version of the student-facing tracker. You see it's color-coded with the must-dos, should-dos, aspire-to-dos. It allows the student to check off or write when they've mastered a topic, or note that they need revision, and then go see the teacher or work with a peer to get additional support. And then the final piece of self-paced learning is the class progress tracker. Again, here's one on the right that's a physical tracker to show you that this is not all have to be done on the computer. In fact, many of our best classrooms, mastery checks and trackers are printed out and put on paper so students can move around the room with them very, very easily, move to get feedback from peers and from teachers. So the class progress tracker, like we said, serves as an opportunity for the teacher to update and know where each student is. It captures students' progress through the lesson based on their mastery checks and whether or not they've passed a mastery check and are ready to move on. It's also used to celebrate progress so that students can see the kind of gains that they're making and be motivated by mastery. So it indicates individual progress and it indicates a target lesson for students, meaning I, as Matt, if I'm walking into a modern classroom each day, my teacher will show me the tracker at the beginning of class and I know which lesson I'm on individually, what's my target for today, and what my suggested due dates are in order to try to pace myself through the day's instruction. Here's an example of what that looks like in a very simple form. Something like this picture on the upper right might be posted to a slide and shared at the beginning of class in order to allow students to see where they are each day. And you see this teacher has anonymized this so that students' names are not on the tracker. It's a great practice if you have a classroom culture where you don't feel comfortable having students' data showed connected with their name. So we know that progress tracking is a critical piece of this work. It's kind of what brings together all of the mastery checks and the blended learning materials and all of the fun and exciting stuff. It's really brought together by this effective tracker. And there are parts of this that really support Tier 1 instruction. In order for there to be effective Tier 1 instruction, we have to teach students both content skills and academic executive functioning skills so that they can access learning and continue to strengthen their work. We also need to help students collaborate and be motivated to engage in the learning. That's part of MTSS. It's part of tiered instruction to ensure motivation and support student engagement. And then finally, and most importantly, it supports differentiation through small group and individual instruction. Teachers in modern classrooms spend 80% of their time, 80%, doing small group or individual instruction, meaning I can spend most of my class pulling students for extra help if they're a little bit behind. So I might pull, in this one, all of the students that are in yellow and have a small group at the beginning of class to really get them going and get them moving. And then once that's done, maybe I'll pull the 2 students that need to revise and work with them on revisions to their assignments. What this means, and this is a little teacher hack, you can integrate Tier 1 and 2 interventions within your core learning environment. This is huge because often we're told as educators, we need more data on Tier 2 interventions. We need more. And you're like, when am I going to do this during my class period? So you're chasing down extra times, trying to find students at lunch, working overtime to put those intervention data in place. In a modern classroom, you can integrate interventions with the core instructional environment, building an even stronger learning environment and preventing more students from having those lingering skill gaps and needs. And then finally, and most quickly, blended instruction makes this all possible. If you're thinking, this is so much going on at one time, how am I going to manage all this? It's built on the idea that your instructional videos, your blended instructional materials can support students in moving through the lesson so that you can do individualized and tailored instruction. You're eliminating the whole class lecture so that you're not doing a show and a performance each day just for students to sit back and watch. You're shifting the work to them by allowing them to navigate through instructional videos and blended learning resources while you strategically target small group instruction and do the high yield strategies around feedback and worked examples that we know are the most important parts of teaching. This also has the added perk of allowing students to access instruction at any time, right? Students can access it during a study hall period, at home, in the morning, even on the bus if they wanted. So even though homework is not required in a modern classroom, many students will take additional things home because they know, I just need to get caught up today. I wasn't as quick in class as I wanted to be, and I own my own learning. The bottom line of blended learning is that it allows students to have the best of you instead of having you do all the work and students getting less of the benefit. Shifting that work to students and allowing you to free up your time to do more is the key piece of the model in blended learning. So Wanted to note that in an era after COVID and after a lot of online learning, there's a lot of wariness about technology. There's a lot of wariness about instructional video. And while there's a good reason for this, right? Students need to be in classrooms collaborating with each other. We know this is really, really important. There's also some important brain research that talks about the value of instructional video as a tool amongst many in a classroom where there is also collaboration and small groups and academic discourse. One of the things is that working memory for each student is going to be different. I talked about my experience with Learner Variability Project, and this was a big piece, thinking about each student's cognitive skills and their variability. Video instruction allows for students to pause and chunk instruction on their own. It allows them to take control of the cognitive load that they're experiencing and ultimately tailor it to what works for them. Video also signals segments and weeds. It allows you to use on-screen visuals, your own voice, just like I am right now, animations, to move you and direct your attention to specific topics. And you can cut out things that might be unnecessary and keep distractions from trickling into the instructional environment. And then finally, it allows for multiple modalities, audio, video, and your text that can allow students to access the instruction no matter what their background is. And I want to say this is particularly important for EL learners who are both processing a language and your content at the same time. They can see subtitles, they can see visuals, that helps them engage. They can also pause and rewind and listen again if there's something they missed the first time. So there's a lot of, even though there's wariness, there's a lot of research that supports the use of instructional video, especially when it's done correctly and integrated into a classroom environment where there is also discourse and collaboration. So best practices for instructional video are something that we teach through our course. It's certainly not something that I would plan to address in a 30-minute presentation, but I do want to let you know that this is a big piece of what we do, is to give you the skills and tools. If this is something that you're like, I was with you, Matt, until you got to this last part, and now I'm feeling a little stressed because I'm not sure I can create videos of that level. That is true for most of our educators when they start, and we teach folks to do this through the course. It's a really exciting opportunity to change and shift around the way you do instruction. If you're somebody who already uses video, who was kind of ahead of the curve in this regard, we'll teach you how to integrate those videos into a self-paced learning plan and build out your entire instructional environment to better leverage the instructional videos that you already have. So I want to bring it all together. We talked about mastery-based learning and those mastery checks being the core of how students advance through their self-paced learning plan. We talked about tracking students' data as a critical piece of that. And you'll never be a more data-driven or data-informed educator than when you have those trackers and all of those mastery checks happening in your classroom on an individual student-by-student level. And then we talked about blended instruction and how it provides the base to allow you to move away from that sage on the stage in front of the classroom work and move into your students and supporting them one by one and in small groups based on what they really need from you. This aligns perfectly with the goals of MTSS Tier 1. It doesn't take me telling you that for you to know that. I'm sure at this point in the presentation, you're like, I get it now. I see how the goals for core instruction that you mentioned at the beginning align with some of the pieces of Modern Classrooms project, but I want to make it extremely clear. One of the goals for MTSS is that it's universal. It provides access to effective standards-based instruction. Modern Classroom does this by using blended learning to provide efficient and accessible access for all learners all the time. MTSS Tier 1 is differentiated, creates structures for equitable support, and prevents skill gaps to meet learners' needs. Modern Classrooms is self-paced and individualized, so students can receive more one-on-one and small group support to ensure that their needs are met. And finally, MTSS Tier 1 is proactive. It monitors progress through formative assessments and allows educators to partner with students and respond to progress monitoring. We do that through mastery checks, revisions, and reassessments, where educators can respond to each student as they progress based on mastery. This is a modern classroom. This is an approach to modernize Tier 1 instruction and meet more students' needs and make our lives as teachers more engaged and more sustainable over time. So thank you for thinking about this with us today, for getting started. And I want to let you know that you can learn more anytime. We're a nonprofit, and all of our information is accessible to you for free by simply scanning this QR code or going to learn.modernclassrooms.org. You can start the free course and learn more about mastery-based, self-paced, and blended learning and how you bring it all together in your instructional environment. If you should want to reach out to us, there's also an opportunity there to connect with us more. I was so thankful to be with you all today, Marty. I appreciate it.
Oh, Matt, such good stuff. Something you said very early on that really resonated with me was that this is a proactive approach to ensure student success. I think so often in teaching we're reactive, and then you're already behind. And so this proactive approach is such a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and we're reactive in an environment where water is constantly flowing into the boat, and we're trying to react and bail it out and bail it out and bail it out. I would say first, Modern Classroom helps you plug the holes in the boat so that when you're bailing out water, you're actually making progress instead of just sitting there drowning as you're trying to bail it out. And that's really ultimately why we exist. We want to help teachers feel like they're not drowning and that they're actually meeting students' needs.
Well, and that was something you said then at the end that I hadn't thought about. I've thought about Modern Classrooms Project many times here in my position at Keep Indiana Learning. And if I were still in the classroom, this would have been my next step too, because what you said at the end, this makes teaching sustainable. It is exhausting to stand. I was a middle school teacher, so I have 6 periods a day, 30 kids in a class, all 180 kiddos, to meet them all where they are. And as a writing teacher, they all need individual feedback and they all need attention. And that's just not sustainable.
No, and you've been there, right? You've done the performance for 30 minutes. You're up there, you're doing your stop and chat, you're doing your turn and talks. You're like getting nods and you're like, yeah, I am just crushing it. And then you get to the formative assessment and 40% of the kids have mastered the topic. And
Yes.
You're like, how did I just waste all of that time? And only 40% of you know what's going on in the lesson. Modern Classrooms prevents you from wasting that time and instead lets you know right away, like, I know these kids aren't getting it. Like, I got to pull them now and I can work with them so that they're right in front of me before we get to the end of the class and we've wasted a whole period.
Right. Where you get to the end of the class and you think, did I even speak English this whole period?
Right.
I have had those moments. So yes. So just one quick thing in wrapping up, talking about the class that's available to teachers. Can you talk a little bit about the support that's available if teachers are ready to take this step? Because let's be honest, Matt, this is a big step to take, but it's a step that's going to pay off. So how are they supported in taking this step?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, any teacher anywhere across the country can take our free course and can connect with us. There's a series of webinars that we run, additional Q&A sessions. There's lots of content we have that can support folks. There's also a Facebook group that is tremendous that teachers from across the world, we have teachers in almost every continent, are talking about things that they're struggling with and sharing resources and ideas, even all the way down to like sharing different versions of their progress trackers that you can just make a copy of and steal. The Facebook group is an excellent resource. Now, in the state of Indiana, many of you may also work in districts that work with us a little more closely. We have a big presence in Indiana. We've actually trained over 1,000 teachers through our virtual mentorship program, which is a more in-depth program that allows teachers to connect with a mentor, allows them to have ongoing support throughout the year from that mentor. So you might want to check with your district too and see if you all have a deeper partnership, because many districts in Indiana do and will continue to have partnerships with us where they receive even more support than that.
So just like we differentiate learning for students, you guys have differentiated learning for adults. And I think that's huge for teachers to realize you're not going to do this alone. You're not by yourself. If you're not in Indiana, not in a district that is partnering with Modern Classrooms Project, you still have that Facebook group. I'm in that Facebook group and I love watching the learning that goes on in there and the sharing, the collaboration. It is such a generous group of people learning and growing together. So if you're watching this thinking, I want to take that step, just maybe start with the Facebook group and watch that conversation and then take steps from there, because this is the way to go.
Thanks, Marty.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our spring speaker event, Matt. We appreciate you. We have one more installment coming up in May with Flora Jones from the Department of Education here in Indiana. So stay tuned for that. And we appreciate you, Matt, and viewers, we appreciate what you do for the students in the state of Indiana. So thank you so much and have a great day.